Welcome to the Why Dad podcast. We are your hosts, Paul Wandry and Andrew Stopelstead, and we are on a mission to figure out what it really means to be a man, a husband, and a father. Not as experts, but just as guys trying to figure it out, learning what actually matters, what's just noise, and how to become the versions of ourselves our families need and deserve. This is a place for honest conversations, real habits, and the kind of growth that happens intentionally. And today, to help us along that journey, we're joined by Matthew Jandernoa, husband, father, and founder of Steadfast Life. And one of the ideas Matthew keeps coming back to is that many men know how to do the right thing, but don't really know their own hearts. And today we're exploring what that means for fatherhood, masculinity, and raising a family. Matthew, welcome to Why Dad.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me, Paul and Andrew.
Yeah, we're glad, happy, and honored to have you part of it, our show.
I also want to say amen to the trying to figure it out part.
Yeah. I think that's something that we all need to remind ourselves to keep front of mind because it's so easy to judge ourselves. We're all prone to do that. I'm a bad father or I'm a bad man or I'm a bad whatever, I'm a failure. But it's like, no, we're just figuring out, we're learning. We're this is our first time being parents. And no matter where you are in the journey, whether it's a newborn or, you've got a few kids under 5 or a few kids under 10 or teens or whatever,
Yeah.
it's that first time that you're in that stage and you're just figuring it out. And we just got to keep practicing and learning and, and hopefully this episode, I'm sure this episode today will help us do that.
Yeah. Because at the end of the day, I mean, if you focus on the ways you're failing or the bad things, to be blunt, how productive is that?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's just
Yeah.
a feedback loop. It just makes everything else worse too. And now not only is the thing you're struggling with a problem, but now you've created this lens by which you view everything as just being less than, which then makes your whole life miserable. And at that point, how do you expect to be a good dad if your viewpoint is everything sucks?
Yeah.
Yeah. And not only that, but then how can you find healing if that's your worldview? Do you know what I mean? But it's so
Yeah.
subtle. It just creeps in when your kid won't go to sleep or they won't eat food or whatever the heck. And then 3 things happen. This was literally today. I had to take several deep breaths when my wife was talking to me and whatever the heck was happening. And I just had to ask myself, because I was getting really angry specifically about my morning didn't happen well, right? So we're in the transition of moving. So we're hanging out at my parents' house in the meantime. And so my morning routine, I wouldn't really call it that right now, is totally shot. I'm lucky if I can get out of bed within 20 minutes of waking up because I don't know, it's like I'm on vacation because I don't go to my parents' house normally. I do that when I'm on vacation for Christmas or whatever. So my whole mindset is just do you really need to get up right now? Anyways, So I
Yeah.
finally get up and then I just lose so much of my day just kind of being lethargic. And I was getting really angry and frustrated. And at one point I just said, is there anything you can do about it? And the answer was, no. So I just took a deep breath and said, okay, well, what can I do something about? And I was like, oh yeah, right now in this moment, I can enter into this moment with my wife when she's trying to talk to me and I'm getting so frustrated about the silliest of questions. And I'm like, how dare you ask me 7 questions at once or whatever. It's well, maybe I wouldn't get so frustrated if I just let go of the things I can't control.
Yeah. Yeah. What great insight. There's my daughter and I would go through some sayings most mornings that we found online. Somebody did it. I was like, oh, that's awesome. And one of the phrases is we can't control everything, but we can control how we react, which according to Viktor Frankl is the last freedom that you'll never lose, right?
Yeah.
So that's awesome that you're reminding us of that. And so this perspective of these feelings or whatever, it's a feedback loop. And how do we respond? Do we respond? That's on us. That's not necessarily intuitive or necessarily a common way that children are raised. Is that something that you were raised with that perspective, or is that something that you learned along the way?
Yeah, I don't think I was raised that way. A really common phrase my mom would say if I was getting frustrated or whatever was, offer it up. And
Oh,
that
yeah.
would just
Heard that
would-
all the
I'm
time
not gonna
too.
lie, that
Yeah.
would piss me off every single time. And fair enough. But the particular struggle that I had with that phrase, it's not a bad phrase or a bad idea, but what I would always struggle with is I felt like it was kind of arbitrary. It's like random suffering equals random grace or random benefit. I'm like, that's so disconnected. And so after a while, I just really kept thinking about it, brooding about it, whatever. And I realized that the more beneficial thing for me is to offer it up for the thing that it would affect if it weren't that way. Meaning,
Whoa.
meaning if I offer it up, that means changing the way that I'm responding in that moment and doing it for the person that it then affects.
Right.
Because that's actually what's happening. You
Yeah.
see what I'm saying?
So,
Does that make
so
sense?
you flip it from being something passive that's happening to you to something more active and
Mm.
intentional.
Right, because that's ultimately, because to offer it up, it doesn't just mean you throw up your hands and say, all right, I'll offer this up for blank. It means to enter into that situation charitably. It means to do it with love and with charity, which means that I'm going to have a receptive posture. I'm going to be looking for the good and then trying to maximize the good. I know that's kind of like, I don't know, modern business approach of like maximize revenue or whatever. That's not what I mean. But it's very simply, in this moment, there are good things and less than good things happening. And so if I want this to actually have an effect on a temporal level and then on a spiritual level, it means that I have to orient myself towards the good, accept that good, and offering up that sacrifice of, pity partying or my own desire for control or whatever, offering that up then for the person that it will then affect, both in that moment, but then also that's going to affect my kids. If I can respond that way consistently, that's going to be huge for my kids and for my wife and literally everyone I interact with. And so in those moments, it's about taking a step out of yourself and thinking, who are all the people that I can actually benefit by changing the way that I respond in this moment? Because the way that I respond in this moment is a catalyst for how I'm going to respond in the next moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was good.
Offer it up is kind of like Christianese for suck it up, right?
Deal with it.
Yeah, deal with it. You get what
Yeah.
you get and you don't throw a fit. Right. But yeah, no, like Andrew said, that lands. And something you said about how like maximizing it, it kind of sounds like business like, but that kind of actually makes a lot of sense to me because especially with being raised in a very religious family and we heard a lot like offered up a lot, and or like just, sacrifice for the sake of sacrifice, etc.
Right.
It almost veered into the spiritual too much. And so kind of like bringing in the human is like we are both human and spiritual creatures. Andrew's the philosopher. He can correct me, if I'm saying it wrong. But like, so
Just a little
we
wrong,
need,
but that's okay.
was that?
So just a little wrong, but that's okay.
But now you threw me off.
I know. I'm so sorry.
No. I set myself up for that. So,
Yeah, you did.
but anyway, point being that we are both physical and spiritual. And we need, if we are just leaning entirely into the spiritual and ignoring our physical selves, then we're doing exactly that. We're like ignoring part of the equation. And so I think it's important to bring both, like to include both.
And ironically, that's what the transgenderism movement does. They totally deny the body because they say, I can be whatever I want to be and my body doesn't mean anything. Ironically, but then they solve that by then changing their body. And it's like, well, wait a minute. Are you a spirit or are you a body? Clearly you think you're both, but you're doing it in a very distorted, dichotomous way that's not integrated. You're just making yourself even more fragmented. And that's really, at the end of the day, that's what mental health issues or illness, whatever you want to call it is fragmentation of the person.
Right.
Like when you're anxious, do you feel like you're in a state of flow where you are like totally present? No, you feel like, oh no, this thing's over here and this thing, and like, oh crap, I forgot to eat this morning, and you're all over the place, And when you're depressed, when you're any of these kinds of struggles that we have, it's when you're fragmented, when you're not acting as an integrated person.
Yeah. Which is also interesting because it's like we have those different elements of ourselves. Like part of us, part of us is feeling anxious. We aren't anxious. Like, or part of us is feeling like, or like we can feel both anxious or sad and joyful at the same time. Like there are kind of like different emotions and different things going on. To your point, that we do kind of have to make sure that they are cohesive and integrated. So that like that's kind of That's an interesting challenge of being human, that we have to like
Mm-hmm.
juggle those things. But then it comes down to something that you said in our initial, like our pre-chat about like knowing your own heart, like knowing yourself, knowing who you are. If you
Mm-hmm.
aren't able to name those things or those elements of yourself or what you tend to do
Mm-hmm.
or whatever, then like
Mm-hmm.
you're going to be, playing whack-a-mole.
Yeah. Right, exactly, and that's ultimately what the devil wants for us, is he wants our life to feel like whack-a-mole, and frankly, I mean, how often do you feel like that? Because I feel that pretty consistently. Is like, "Geez, I can't get anything right." I mean, I'm being a little dramatic, but it's like all of these things where it's like the business, the family, the this, the that. It's like all these things you have to feel like you're trying to juggle, and it just naturally pulls us away, and I think that's kind of the whole point of, when sin entered the world, fragmentation entered the world. Like, imagine a life without that fragmentation, without that juggling. That's a life without sin. Like, that's a world where sin didn't affect the world. Because the thing with original sin is that it fragmented, it broke that relationship that we have with God, with creation, with each other, and with ourselves. So now everything's fragmented. And so, yeah, you're gonna feel like you're juggling, but that doesn't mean that's like the end all be all. 'Cause I think I was literally just chatting with one of my clients, and he was just talking about all these different things that he's struggling with. He has a particular illness that feels like it just affects his whole life. And he's like, is this ever going to be, can I even be holy? Like, because it feels like whenever I look at a movie or I look at a screen, sorry, I feel like I just become a more sinful person or a more jaded or agitated person. And he's like, and you can't escape screens in the modern world. So like, is holiness even
Yeah.
possible? And I think one of the first steps, I really like what the definition of patience is. It gets a bad rap because usually when you think about patience, it just means like shut up and do nothing and just, take a back seat. But the actual definition of patience, or I'm not going to give the exact, but a description, is an unwillingness to be overcome by sorrow. Because life throws so many curveballs at you, and there's so many aspects of suffering and sadness and sorrow and death and all of these things. And patience is the unwillingness to be overcome by them. And I just think about Romans 8:25. When we hope for what we do not see, we wait for it with patience. Because you hope for what is good. And if you
Right.
don't see it, that means you just see the bad stuff. And that means you have to choose to not be overcome by the less than, by the bad, so that you can actually find satisfaction and fulfillment in the good that you hope for.
Right.
But it's not always easy when, you're late on a payment, or, you have to have a huge bill that you have to pay, or, someone dies and there's so many things, right? And I think that's the thing that I in our isolated culture is we've just so quickly forget that this isn't like a special situation, because we can fall into this like narcissism of like, woe is me, pity party, my life sucks. And like, yeah, sure, it probably does in that moment, but it doesn't mean that that's the end of the world, that that's the end of it. There's a lot of people struggling, and some of them choose to hold on to hope for what is good, and some people don't. And you can tell the difference by, their overall life satisfaction and just what they do with their life.
Wow. So, like, while you're saying that, I was kind of tying in what you said about charity and the
Mm-hmm.
whole offering up perspective, and that trying to tie the two together is blowing my mind because one, we think about charity and that ambiguous term it is, but what it's to do the good of the other, just that. And you were talking about, benefiting the others with offering it up and
Mm-hmm.
going, okay, I don't have control over XYZ, but I can control who's going to benefit from this. And
Mm-hmm.
then bringing in that aspect of hope, like, okay, this is really bad. Woe is me. At the end of the day, sure, I'm going to benefit from it, but who right now also around me is going to benefit from me changing my attitude and looking
Mm-hmm.
at this and moving through it instead of giving up. Where else was my mind going? This you're giving me good thoughts to generation ideas, Matthew.
Yeah.
So what was the point where, I mean, you said you growing up hearing that, like what was the point where you just decided to make that mental change into coming into these uncontrollable moments with that aspect?
Yeah. So the quick caveat is I don't know if there was a one moment thing, which I think is also really important for
Right.
people to realize. I think, and I think this is more especially when you get into like Protestant Christianity, this idea of like once saved, always saved.
Mhm.
I think that ideology can then permeate into once I converted, always converted. And it's
Mhm.
like a flip of the switch kind of thing, which just isn't true.
Yeah.
Talking to anyone who's trying to live the Christian life is like there's a lot of like mini conversions that happen along the way.
Yeah.
But I think one of the biggest, even just going back to the whole heart conversation, I was a missionary in Ireland for about a year, right out of high school. And there's at one point when, just to be simplistic, I got a written warning because I told a girl I liked her. But the whole situation, it's a long story short, but the whole situation was convoluted because she kind of pressured me into it. There's a whole backstory to it. And I just felt like the biggest pile of crap ever. Like I just felt like I did this terrible thing. Part of that was because I'm in this bubble of ministry where everything gets magnified.
Right.
But putting that aside, just that experience of feeling like just scum of the earth, total screw up. And I remember we were at a retreat center and I went to kind of my room and I remember just journaling and writing stuff down, terrible things about myself. So I don't know how many F-bombs I wrote in that book. Like so many bad things. And one of my teammates came in. He tried to chat with me, like, I don't know, what, trying to cheer me up or whatever, just engage with me. And I was just like, get the F out of it. Like I was so done.
Yeah.
And my supervisor came in and he walked in, sat on the bed across from me. And I just kind of threw the notebook at him and just said, read this, basically expecting him to either say, not expecting him to say, yep, you're right. I think part of me like wanted that almost, like that self-pitying part of me was like, yeah, tell me how bad I am so I can be justified in my pity.
Right.
But I expected him to read it and then say, no, Matt, that's not you, and kind of do the cliche stuff. But what he did, he read 3 sentences and he dropped and said, I'm not reading this shit. And I was like, what? Like, that's not how this is supposed to go.
Right.
And he just cut through the crap he said, and he used the real words. You're not an F up. You're not this. You're not that.
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't say this, but he carried the tone of like, dude, this isn't you. Get over it. But in the most older brother, dad kind of way. I don't know how else to explain it.
Yeah.
And I swear this veil got lifted off my eyes because it was that shock effect of like, what? He didn't do the thing I expected him to do. And then he just bluntly said, you're not the things that you, like he just spelled out the things that I just called myself and said, you're not that, with like aggression.
Yeah.
But that's what I needed. You know what I mean? Like, and that's a huge part of masculine initiation is you need older men to be a little aggressive with you. I mean, even if you just think about the psychological development of kids, they need rough and tumble play. And that generally comes from the dad. And they need that. It does a lot of stuff to link the two hemispheres together for this, that, and whatever. But you need, like, aggression is so necessary. And so that, I walked out of that room and I genuinely felt like a new man. Like I just felt like a totally different person because he just grabbed my worldview and said, that's stupid, you know?
Yeah.
You know, and with, you know, while saying like, because you're good, it's stupid because you are good.
Right.
And so, and again, that's probably like if I had to point to a moment where like something shifted, I would say that was the moment. But again, there's this constant conversion where, you know, okay, the same moment's going to come back again. That same experience of wanting to turn inward and look at how bad you are or whatever. But it's that invitation from the Lord to hold on to what is good and to refuse to be overcome by the sorrow. And that's a huge part of how we participate in our own healing. And I think that's another thing too, is that when it comes to the healing of our heart, we play a very active role in that. You know, even if you just think about going to the doctor, you know, if they tell you to do something that's going to be good for you, you actually have to do it.
Right.
You know, like if they say, hey, this thing will cure all of your sickness, you still have to participate in that and do that.
Yeah.
And it's very similar with what the Lord desires for our own healing. He's never just going to heal us without our permission.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because that's the whole point of being human is we have a free will.
Right.
And he's not going to disrespect us and just take control of our life and make everything easy again, because that's just disrespectful. You know, like imagine if you're trying to fix something and someone walks in and says, oh, let me just fix that all for you. You know, sometimes it might be appreciated depending on the circumstance. But if you're actively engaged or if you don't want help and someone tries to help you, that's really frustrating. It's like, dude, back off. Like, I got this. Like, I want to do this.
Right.
You know?
Right. Yeah.
But it's very different if I say, hey, can you help me with this? Because now it's a relational bid. It's a bid for connection.
Yeah.
Whereas when the guy just steps in, he's not looking at the relationship. He's not looking at you. He just sees the problem and he tries to fix it. And that's not the God that we have. He sees us. He doesn't just see the problems in our lives. He actually sees us. And he wants us to want the relationship. He wants us to participate in our own healing Because if we don't, like, what's the point?
Yeah, I really like that. That makes me think of like, little kids learning to do, you name it. Like, for example, trying to open a applesauce or something.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I see them struggling, and then like you want to swoop in and open it for them,
Mm-hmm.
but then like what is that like if you're doing that every single time, and like one, you're kind of like coddling them, and
Mm-hmm.
you're preventing, what's the word? You're depriving them of that opportunity to
Mm-hmm.
struggle and learn that it takes a little effort to get things done sometimes. And then two, you're telling them like, "Oh, I don't trust you. Like, I don't think that you
Mm-hmm.
can do this and I'm
Right.
coming in to do it." So then they're like, "Oh yeah, like." But
Mm-hmm.
to your point, like, no, God doesn't do that to us. Like, He does trust us to do it and to make
Mm-hmm.
our own mistakes and to learn from it. And yeah, I just think that like it's applicable to, our relationship with God, but then also, like us and our kids, like how often
Mm-hmm.
are we doing the same or the opposite of, you know?
Yeah, and in psychology, the term would be learned helplessness. If everything's always done for me, I never try to do it myself. And you think about like kind of entitled kids or just kids in general that they're not like independent, they don't think for themselves in any capacity. A big part of that is because either people ignored them, their parents ignored them, or someone ignored them, or two, they saw the problem, not the person, and so they just swooped in and did it all for them. And so then what are you teaching them? You're teaching them, hey, if you can't do something, just have someone else do it.
Yeah.
The moment you start struggling, someone else will fix it. That's not a very helpful lesson for life because that's just simply not true. Especially when you're the dad, you're the buck stops with you. It's like you're the person people are turning to. And so if you've learned, if I'm struggling, someone else will fix it. Well, what happens when there's no one else to turn to? You naturally fall into despair. You naturally fall into shame. You naturally fall into those things. And again, that's the whole patience thing. And that's like, as a kid, fostering patience in your kids is when something is hard, being with them in it, and then saying, okay, let's get back to it. I'll be with you the whole time, but you're going to be the one doing it. That's
Yeah.
so powerful.
Yeah.
So, since question for you both, since you're dads, like, how hard is it? Us as men, we want to solve the world's problems. Like, how hard is it to just not swoop in and let your kids go through that and try to work through it instead of just like, you're taking too long, I'm going to do this for you,
Hmm.
or whatever the situation might be.
Definitely depends on how tired I am.
True statement.
Valid.
And hungry and whatever the heck else.
Yeah, like I think it comes down to, for me personally, it comes down to, trying to do the thing, whatever, like opening the applesauce or whatever it is, to Matthew's point, is like just seeing the problem, and like it's almost a stroke of my own ego. It's like I know I can do this, or like,
Hmm.
you know, an itch that needs to be scratched or whatever. So it's like, but it's about me,
Hmm.
like I don't want to wait. I don't want to like deal with like them struggling, or I see a problem, I need to take care of it. But, if we take a step back and we're like, okay, hey, like, are we parenting our kids for this moment now, or are we parenting our kids for when they're 20,
Hmm.
30, 40?
Hmm.
And to your point, Matthew, like, are we going to teach them learned helplessness? Or are we going to teach them to think for themselves and to know how to take on challenges and to be
Hmm.
resilient? So if we're keeping that in mind, which easier to do when we're fed and rested, right?
Yeah.
But if we're keeping that in mind, then it's an easy
Hmm.
decision, and then it's about keeping my mouth shut if my wife decides to jump in and help out.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think it's ultimately, so it's really cool. So in the Catholic Church, in the Catechism, I have recently realized this as of like this February or so when I was reading it for particular reasons. And there's a couple of things that it says about the heart and what comes from the heart. It says that prayer comes from the heart, and he whose heart is far from the Lord prays in vain. And it's really striking because what that really means is that there's a level of brutal transparency you need to have with the Lord, wherever you're at, what's going on in your life, not entirely, but to some extent, only praying for the things that you actually are willing to do. So if you want humility, you can't just pray for humility if you're not actually willing to do the part of being humble, right? So
Yeah.
only praying for what you actually want and being transparent with that, but also just being real with him in many ways. The other thing too, that it also says that desire comes from the heart. And so if prayer comes from the heart and desire comes from the heart, that means I have to share my desires with the Lord. And so if he's modeling fatherhood to us and parenting to us, that means that we have to allow our children space to express their desires to us. Because if we're always stepping in, they never have that space to express their desires to us, which is going to mean that they're not going to think it's necessary to express their desires to God in prayer, which means their heart's going to be far from the Lord, which means they're not going to know how to pray.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing too, sin also comes from the heart. And so this idea of like trust your heart, it's like yes and no, because you want to trust your heart in the sense that your heart is good, but you don't want to trust everything that comes from your heart because sin comes from the heart, right? Our wayward desires come from the heart. So you can trust your heart in the sense that it is good and that good things are there, but it doesn't mean that it's always aimed in the right direction. And so that's the whole part of parenting, is helping our kids to aim what is coming from the heart, not to subdue what's coming from the heart. And so that's where it takes on our part to figure out, okay, what are they actually looking for? And how can I help them how can I satisfy that for them and help them be satisfied in a way that's actually for their own good, not just what's easiest so I can get on with whatever's on my phone or, the game or, even just peace and quiet or a cigar or whatever it might be.
Yeah, that last part is something I think Paul and I have kind of talked about, and you mentioned, Paul, too, all the parts we are, our intellect and our emotions or our heart. And so helping the kids understand, like you said, Matthew, understand where the heart is aligning towards, and instead of just leaping forward without reflecting on what is the good, the true good that the heart is desiring in those moments. So really helping our kids to think about where on that level to discern what is the true good in those instances.
Would it be accurate to say that, like, in order to truly trust your heart, like, so for example, like, I could trust if I'm on the football field and I could trust the plays coming in in my earpiece, but if the earpiece is garbled and I'm hearing the wrong thing, like, okay, like, so I need to, run the other way, or I need to spike and like, it just doesn't make sense. You know, it's like, okay, I trusted it, but you were getting incorrect information. So like, which I feel like can so often be the case with ourselves where, okay, yeah, I want this thing, but if you take the time to think about it and dig into it and be like, like, for example, like this might not be a great example, but like, oh, I really want chips, like I really want to just hammer this bag of chips right now, just demolish it. It's like, okay, not necessarily like a bad thing, but if you keep doing that, not also a great thing. But like, where's that coming from? It's like, it's probably because, you're tired or you're stressed or you're hungry or all the above. And addressing those concerns is a good thing. Like, you do want to make sure that like you're getting rested. But if you just take it at surface level and just like, okay, like first, sound wave that comes across you, like comes at you, then you can't trust that. But so you had to know yourself first in order to trust yourself.
Absolutely. And that's the life of virtue, is really about becoming more fully human. And so we're definitely not a machine, but I'll use a machine as an analogy. So it's not sufficient. But I want to say that because there are a handful of people right now who think that we're just behavioristic machines, which is not true. But if you have a machine and it's operating efficiently and effectively, it's well oiled, it's, all the parts are in the right spot, etc., it's going to produce the thing that it's created to produce, And in a similar way, a plant, if the plant is getting watered, getting sunlight, has the nutrients from the soil, it's going to produce good fruit. And so the more that we are doing that on a physical level, first of all, right? But then more than that, fruit. And so similarly, if on a physical level, obviously, if we're getting all the things like the food and the nutrition and the sunlight, all that kind of stuff, but then also if we are living the way we were designed to live, then you can trust what comes from the heart more. You can trust yourself more, right?
Right.
And I think that's one of the biggest things, is that we've forgotten that we all have a human nature. And a nature is the way in which it operates, to be simplistic. And so if we all have a human nature, that means that there are certain things, certain ways of living, certain ways of responding, certain ways of going about life that's going to be conducive to our flourishing. And we've forgotten that we have a human nature. We're so individualistic that it's like, no, Paul is so special that he's nothing like Matthew. And it's like, well, that's just not true. Yes, he's unique. Yes, he's special, right? We're all snowflakes, right? But we all are human. And so, in the same way that food is good for you, food's good for me, right? And patience is good for you, patience is good for me. And that's what the virtues are. The virtues are how we can live in accord with our human nature in a way that actually brings about satisfaction and fulfillment, because the original sin, Adam and Eve wanted to be like God, but without God. And so it's the same thing of saying, I want to be able to eat really terrible food and be healthy. And it's like, that's just not how that works.
So, we've been talking about a lot of good stuff. We've been talking about, our mentality when we're in difficult situations where maybe we can't control the variables. We've talked about, patience and knowing ourselves and like, and most recently, like finding or working on these things that will best serve us as humans and to find that happiness. How does this all for you, like how does this influence like you as a dad? Because you've got two with one on the way, or is
Yeah.
that right? Yeah. So how does all of this, this is a really big question, but like how does
Yeah.
this translate to, Matthew as a dad, on the day to day?
I'll give one answer and then I'll give the answer you're looking for. So the technical answer, the honest answer that I would give is that ultimately, a good father would also be a good single person, because ultimately a good father would be a good single person because, again, of that human nature aspect. So I want to say that first because I work with some engaged couples, and one of the guys is like, how the heck am I going to be a dad? And I'm like, well, the same way that you're a good husband, which is the same way as being a good person, being a good man, right? It's the same thing. It's always applicable. So that's like the answer, to kind of reel it back and so people don't get overwhelmed of like, how could I be a good dad? It's like, well, if you live life well, that will translate. But more than that, actually stepping into fatherhood, it's increased the number of invitations from the Lord to see him and to grow as a person. But I think it's just the weight of it. I mean, like, it means something now, and not that it didn't mean something before. Because I obviously did. I'm worthwhile. I have value. And, at the very least, it's worth me giving honor to God and living the way that He's calling me to live. I don't know how else to explain it, but it just matters to me more. Like when I'm holding my daughter when she was just born, or I'm holding my son, the affections rise up. It's just, and I was just thinking about this like today or the other day. I was thinking about Captain America and Winter Soldier, and there's this part at the, if you haven't seen it, I guess I'm spoiling it, but there's at the end of the Winter Soldier movie, Captain is, I'll be with you to the end of the line, basically, willing to die for his friend so that his friend can know who he is. Because Winter Soldier, Bucky, has been brainwashed, totally forgotten who he is.
Right.
So and Steve Rogers is willing to die so that he can know who he truly is. And I was thinking about that, and I was like, that'd be hard to die for someone in that kind of situation. Like if they're the one hurting you, because the setup is Bucky, the Winter Soldier, is literally trying to kill Steve Rogers. And he says, I'm not going to fight you because I want you to know who you are. So I was thinking about that, and I was like, geez, that'd be hard. But then I thought about, like, if one of my kids went AWOL or something, I don't know, they went completely AWOL and they had a knife and they're trying to kill me. I don't know how my brain got here. But I was thinking about that, and I was just thinking, yeah, like I actually, who knows what I would do in the moment, but just noticing where my heart's at right now, like I would want to do that. Like I would want to die so that my child could know who they actually are. And if you just very quickly take one step further, that's exactly what God did. He died for us so that we can know who we are, and we're the ones killing him. It's like, if you don't just sit with that for a second, and even if you don't cry, if you're not like moved to that emotion of tears, yeah, like Jesus loves us so much that he's willing to allow us to kill him so that we can know who we actually are and that he loves us. And that is what Christ calls fathers to and husbands to. Love your wives as Christ loved the church. So what does that look like in the day-to-day life? Every time your wife or kid pisses you off, it's not retaliating so that they can know who they actually are. It's having that patience, having that gentle firmness so that they can know who they actually are. And yeah, it's overwhelming at times, but it's so much more meaningful than just do a good job at work and call it a day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's cool though, because even if you're not married, like I said earlier, the setup for this, how do you become a good dad? By being a good husband. How do you be a good husband? By being a good man. I don't just mean good as in like good behavior, goody two shoe or whatever. I mean in the sense of being a quality, fully functioning, a full human, right? Like
Yeah.
you are a good as in the height, right, of who you can be. And if you can do that, then you can take 1 second to imagine your future kids, your future spouse, and just think, by me doing this right now, I'm really doing it for them.
Yeah.
I'm really doing this for the people that matter most to me so that they can know who they truly are. Because if you've ever been around someone who's just like a good person, meaning the height of who they can be, it just brings it out of you,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. It does.
And I just find that to be one of the most inspiring things is, yeah, when Christ says, love your wives as Christ loved the church, that extends to your children. But ultimately, like it's not this cross that you begrudgingly hold on to. It's something that you just love them and you have such affection for them that that's what you want. And that's really what it is to be virtuous. We fall short when it comes to what we think virtue is. We think it's just doing the right thing even when you don't want to.
Yeah.
When in reality, to be virtuous is to habitually desire what is good, habitually do what is good, and know the good to be good. And we forget that being a part of being a good person, a good human, to the fullest extent of who you can be, means to desire what is good. That's why virtue is easy, because you want to do it. I'm not saying you don't have wayward desires or temptations or whatever that threaten to distract you, but ultimately you want it. And that you can think of that desire as energy. So you have the motivation, the energy to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Man, that's a lot to chew on. I do like what you prefaced it with, because that's exactly something we have in our intro is like how to be a better man, husband, and father. Because
Mm-hmm.
for that exact reason, because one
Yeah.
influences the next, and ultimately, that's what we're doing. It's like we're teaching by doing, we're teaching by learning.
Mm-hmm.
We're trying to show our kids what it's like to try to be that better person. And then the other thing that struck me is like the patience keeps coming up in this episode. And I like the definition that you had earlier. There's also another one that I heard. Andrew, you'll probably remember this from that Men of Virtue night that we went to
Yeah.
with Father Joseph. But and help me if I get some of these words wrong. But it was something to the effect of patience is being able to see the potential in X, like in the other or in
Mm-hmm.
the event. So like if your kid is driving you up the wall, right? Like patience is being able to see is like, okay, like they're struggling right now, but I know that they are capable of, doing this or learning how to do this or learning how to regulate themselves. And this also ties into learning about themselves,
Yeah.
knowing
Yeah.
themselves, seeing that potential for them to do that. So that's like, it's all kind of like a full circle. It's like, that is patience because you see that potential, and that is something that like for me, revs me up as a parent.
Mm-hmm.
Similar to like the revelation you shared with us is like, yeah, like, left to their, the own devices or the devices of society, like they'll probably go chasing, hedonistic
Yeah.
pleasures and whatever and like stay on the surface. But like what I can help them do and like help them unlock is how to kind of like peel the layers and get deeper and deeper.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
and then unlock not just those simple pleasures, but like true happiness,
Yeah.
true integration, true whatever. So it's like it's kind of like it's on the same wavelength of what you're talking about, but just like a, a little bit
Yeah.
different. But
Yeah.
but I don't know. That's all just super resonating with me strongly. So thank you.
And something that St. Francis de Sales says, I'm paraphrasing because it's a whole chapter, but he says, while it is important to be patient with others and with circumstances, it is most important to be patient with ourselves. And so if you take that with the definition we're talking about, which is an unwillingness to be overcome by the suffering, to see one's potential, to focus on the good and pursue that and endure the less than good for the sake of what is good, then that's again going back to trying to figure out parenthood and trying to figure it out is, yeah, you're going to mess up along the way, right? You're going to say something at
Yeah.
the very least, let's just say you're a perfect dad. You're going to punish them at some point in a way that's like less than perfect or something, right? There's always going to be something that's less than the ideal because, on this side of original sin, we're fallen people. And so that's the most crucial thing is to not be overcome by your own sorrow, by your own suffering, by your own weaknesses that you inflict on yourself, or your own health issues or your own, whatever it is, if you're stuck with anxiety or depression, whatever it is, to not be overcome by that. And that's something that anybody can do. And that's so important to being a good father because if you're getting overcome by your own sorrow and your own suffering, it's going to be a lot harder to model that for your kids and to help them to grow in patience because you kind of need it in order to give it.
Yeah. And then mixing the two definitions, you can take that solace or relish in the notion of you have that potential to be that good man, that good husband, and that good father, and you're working and striving on getting to there. So yeah, combining these two definitions really opens up a whole new level and world of
Yeah.
look
And that's
going introspect. Yeah.
keep going. Yeah. Well, and that's Romans 8:25. When we hope for what we do not see, we wait for it with patience. All right. It's that you see the potential. You see what might happen. You see the good that isn't yet present.
Kind of shifting gears a little here, because something you mentioned earlier, like one of your clients, and he's like, well, like how can I be holy, and so I I I have a question about that, so, and this is going somewhere, but is being holy, is that a finite state, or is that like, do you like kind of like what you were saying about like
Hmm.
converting and then like you're good?
Yeah.
Is that holiness? Is like you achieve holiness and then you're holy, or is it something else?
Yeah, well, the classical definition of holiness is to be set apart, right? But I mean, that's the biggest thing too. Is it's really easy to view holiness as like a thing that like you get there and then you have it like draped over your shoulders and you're like,
Yeah.
I have the holiness, everybody, I have it. But if you really think about, if you just go back to the Old Testament, to be holy means to be set apart. So God set his people apart from others for himself. And so why did he do that? Because one, he wants them to be a model, right? To be a model to the world of what it means to be set apart, what it means to be holy. But why did he do that? What's the desire of his heart? He desires relationship. Ultimately, holiness is to be in relationship with God. And the way that we do that is obviously through prayer, but it's also through growing in virtue and living the way that God designed us to live. And so when it comes to like achieving holiness, it's like an oxymoron because I feel like it's more so about it's almost like you have it when you desire it and you are moving towards. It's not like it's like virtue. Virtue isn't the end, it's the means by which we come to our end, right? Virtue isn't the goal, holiness isn't the goal, it's the thing that allows us to find what we're actually made for, which is God, right?
Yep.
And that's not to the detriment of having a relatively satisfying or fulfilling life on earth, because God wants us. John 10:10, I came that you may have life and have it abundantly. It's not like this gamble of, okay, take the really crappy life right now and I promise you it'll pay off, dude. It's like, no, that's not God. He wants us to be fully alive in this life and the next.
Yeah.
So it's really hard because if you take it honestly, it's like, how do you define holiness?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I think it's a harder question than people make it out to be, because people will give off like one-off definitions. But
I think I think you did well though. Like, and what I'm taking away from it is it's like you said, like it's not a destination. It's the journey more so. Like it's becoming virtuous, becoming holy, and the reason why I asked that is because I think that's parenthood as well. It's like it's not about being like the ideal father, or the ideal husband. It's about doing the things that get you closer to that. It's about becoming the best father that you can be. It's about becoming. And, I think that's probably one of the best things that we can pass on to our kids is like, okay, like, yeah, like I fall short in all these things, but, I see the potential. I see my potential and I see your potential and I'm striving for that and I'm working towards it. And it's that motion, it's that forward progress and that continually, okay, veer off the path, get back on the path.
Mm-hmm.
That is what makes you a good father, a good husband,
Mm-hmm.
or arguably that is what makes you holy,
Yeah. Right. The Christian life is perpetual conversion back to God. Like that's what really holiness is the willingness to convert back to him, to come back to him, to come back to him. I mean, like St. John Paul II went to confession every single day. And I'm like, dude, you got to know yourself really well to know the ways in which you fall short in like those little ways. Do you know what I mean? Like I'm
Yeah.
like, I go to confession like once a week, once every other week, once a month, once a couple of months. And I'm just like, I don't know, what did I do?
Right.
And that's not because I'm holy. That's because I don't know myself. So maybe in part holiness is a big part of knowing yourself in light of God's vision of yourself. And the more that we convert back to God, the more that we come to know ourselves the way that God knows us, which is who we truly are. And so whenever we deviate from that, we can spot that and then we can confess that as saying, hey, that's not who I am. That's not what Christ is calling me to. I missed the mark on that one.
Yeah. Oh man, confession is a whole other like line of conversation that like, we could probably do a whole podcast on that, mostly because of conversation. Thank you for sharing your thoughts with us.
Can I say one last thing?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And then if you do have time, we've got a few quick questions for you.
Absolutely. So the last thing that I want to say is that it's really easy to view virtue, holiness, etc., as like a thing that's like a check off the list. Kind of like, I got to eat clean. Why? Well, it's just a good thing to do. I don't know, man. It's just like the good thing to do, this arbitrary goodness or whatever. Just recently, I was thinking about humility, and a lot of the times we think that humility is the way that we think about ourselves, but humility is a sub-virtue of temperance, and temperance is the virtue that aims our desires towards what will satisfy them, like towards the good. And so if humility is a sub-virtue of temperance, it's more so about the way in which we desire, not about the way that we think. And what I've come to realize that humility is desiring what is good for its own sake, not for our own sake. So it's not about possessing the good. It's about, I'm just stoked that the good is happening. And what I've realized is that a lack of humility leads to comparison, leads to resentment, leads to shame, because in all the situations, it's always a you have, I don't have, or I have, you don't have. It's always this comparison thing. And so what I've specifically noticed, certain relationships that I'm jealous of, and I'm like, oh, I want that relationship, and I'll see them have a positive interaction with somebody, and I'm like, oh, why do they have to have that relationship with them? Like, they're not that great. I'm better. What that whole that whole conversation you have with yourself. That when I thought about humility, I realized that, and what I would actually do is I would see like a picture of them and I'd get angry because I'm like, oh, they have a good relationship with that person. And what I would literally do, I would notice this tension in my body, right? When you get anxious, when you start comparing, when you get resentful, you notice like this tension in your body. And what I would do is I would go, take a deep breath, take up all that tension, shrug the shoulders, deep breath, let it all go, and just say, I'm really glad that they're in that person's life. They're a good man. And I express gratitude for the goodness of them and what's good in their life. And I kid you not, the comparison started going away. Social awkwardness started going away because I wasn't so concerned about having the right interaction, so they started to like me at all.
Right.
And I just noticed that I was less reactive, and overall my life satisfaction increased. And it was this experiential moment where I already knew that like living the virtuous life allows you to have a more fulfilling life. But it was this moment of like, my gosh, humility is awesome. Why? Because it makes me it doesn't just make me a better person, quote unquote. It's like, whoa, I like life more.
Yeah.
And I think that is the biggest thing that we can forget, is that God's design for us isn't just this arbitrary good thing because God's arbitrary or whatever. You silly goose, that's how I made you. And when you live this way, you're going to be happier.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing we tell our kids,
Right.
go to sleep. You'll be happier for it.
Yeah. No, I'm really glad that you kind of ended or, shared that with us as kind of a final capsule, because, something that you said earlier is like about like, desire the good and know that the good is good. It's like exactly what you're saying now. It's like, it's not just like some highfalutin vague thing like you must do these things because it is what is expected of you. It's like, no, like literally if you do these things, you're going to be stoked.
Yeah.
Right.
And one thing I'll say about that, like that example you shared, because that's something that I for sure can relate with. Is like when you see like, okay, that relationship and you're like, oh, like it's like, are you desiring that specific relationship, or are you desiring like having a good relationship with
Mm-hmm.
somebody and
Mm-hmm.
having that connection is like, because sometimes it might be speaking like, yes, on the one hand it's good to recognize, okay, like it's cool that they have that for each other and whatever, but then on the other, like, you may have a deeper need for greater connection with people in your life. So what are you going to do, not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily with that person, though maybe, but like, what are
Mm-hmm.
you going to do to go and
Mm.
deepen those relationships and deepen those
Yeah.
connections and seek that good for itself, which, relationships and connection, that is a good,
Mm-hmm.
So just, my 2 cents to share to your $5, or well, not to put a price on what you
Yeah.
shared,
Comparison.
your invaluable, your invaluable insight, priceless insight. But no, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And with that, I'm glad that we ran into this issue. We don't have our time for our rapid fire that are not rapid fire questions, but maybe that just means we'll have to do a round two.
We did skip the first
Okay,
question.
we can do that one. You want to do it,
Yeah.
Andrew?
No, yeah, it's your question.
Okay. This is the last question, and then we'll end the show. What is the most dad thing you've done this week?
So today, my 2-year-old didn't want to eat, and I said, "You know what? You're gonna eat, kid." So I took that fork and I put the piece of chicken on it, and I said, "You want some chicken?" And she goes, "No." And I say, "Do you want the chicken?" "No." So I like put it up against her mouth, and I didn't like grab her hand or her head forcefully. I just put my hand around, I kind of cupped her head, and I said, "Eat the chicken." She goes, "No." I keep poking her with the chicken. And then eventually, like 5 minutes later, she opens her mouth and eats the chicken.
Oh boy, man, that takes some determination right there and
But
patience.
then she ate the whole meal, and I'm like, let's go.
Oh man, yes. Well, I think we have all found ourselves in what's the word? Standoffs with our kids, and
As
that
an
is
uncle,
definitely
I have with two.
that is a very dad and uncle thing. So anyway, thank you, Matthew. What a great way to end the show. Andrew, thank you. And for our listeners, be sure to, if this struck you, or you're thinking of somebody who you think it will land with them, be sure to share this with them. And thank you.
Yes. Thank you,
Thanks for
Matthew.
having me.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you all.
All right. Toodles.